And we are live, I think. So hello, everyone, and welcome to Book Plus Author, our book club series that we host. I'm Meg Collins, and I'm on the author events team at Macmillan, and I'd like to take just a couple minutes to go over some housekeeping items before I let these two take it away. So first of all, I'd like to thank all of the bookstores who partnered with us on this event today. If you have not already, please check out the link that I'll be dropping in the chat to purchase a copy of Little Secrets from one of our partners. We've got the chat box below for you to talk with each other, and we also have the ask a question box below me, where you can put any questions that you'd like answered during the second half of this event. We'll be keeping an eye on both for general disruption, and we reserve the right to delete any inappropriate or offensive comments or questions and to ban from the event anyone who's being disruptive. Please keep this in mind and treat both of our panelists and your fellow viewers with respect and politeness. And now today, I'm pleased to welcome Jennifer Hillier, author of Jar of Hearts, Little Secrets, and the upcoming Things We Do in the Dark, which will be on sale in July of this year. She's joining us from Toronto, where she lives with her family, and we're so pleased to have her here talking about Little Secrets, which recently came out in paperback. In conversation with her is a fellow Macmillan author, S.A. Cosby, author of Blacktop Wasteland and Razorblade Tears. Welcome to both of you.
Thank you so much, Meg.
Thank you for having us. Well,
hi.
Hey,
it is so good to see your face. It has been a minute, right? I think the last time I saw you, Sean, was Dallas. I think it was Dallas ButcherCon, the last time I saw you.
If we only knew what we know now. Oh my God. That was so much fun. I was just talking to somebody the other day about how incredibly gratifying it is to be around other writers in that kind of setting. It's like, you have your friends and your family that, support you, but there's something about being able to communicate with other writers. And so that's why I jumped at the chance to be in discussion with you today, because I love your writing.
I'm glad to talk to you. I'm just glad to talk to you for any reason. So that, it's just so good to see you. Like, we just haven't seen each other in so long.
Yes, ma'am. And you've always been so kind to me, and I can't tell you how much I appreciate.
You know what, though? Before we talk, I want to hugely congratulate you on what do you call this year that you've had? I mean, not that I'm surprised at the explosion, but then also not at all. So, I mean, Edgar nomination and New York Times, all in the same, how do you feel?
It is both. It's surreal and exciting and unbelievable. And if it's a dream, please, no one wake me up. I mean, leave me at the end of Vanilla Sky. I don't wake up.
But, let me tell you, though, it couldn't happen to a better person and a more talented person. I'm so freaking happy for you. Like, it's, I don't know. It feels like it's happening to me because I'm so happy for you.
You're so kind. I really appreciate it. But we are here to talk about your book, which so if people looking at home, watching at home don't know, Jennifer and I are friends. And so when I finished reading Little Secrets in hardcover, I immediately texted her and I'm like, did you know this was going to happen when you started this book? Why did this character do that? How did you do that? Why are those people doing that? And I was insane with questions, because anybody who reads my books, and you were so kind to be so nice and complimentary, but anybody who reads my books know that I usually have characters resolve issues by hitting each other in the face with hammers or wrenches or garden. I'm not subtle in my denouement, but there's something, and I said this to you in text, and I'm gonna say it here. You have this incredible ability to take these people who are outwardly usually very beautiful, very physically attractive. They usually have good lives where they're living, upper middle class or even higher. And you're able to map the interior darkness of these folks in such a way with such skill. It's like plucking a rose and then looking down in the petals, and they're like nails and pins and
that's a good image.
That external beauty that masks this internal darkness. And you did it with Jar of Hearts incredibly well. But you also do it with the lead character of Little Secrets. So for anybody who's watching who hasn't read it, and I don't know why they haven't, but if they haven't, can you tell us a little bit about Little Secrets, a little bit about the plot?
Yeah. So the book opens with a woman in her early 40s. Her son is kidnapped while she's walking around a farmer's market, and she blames herself, obviously. And at the end of that opening scene, they look for the kid, they don't find him. And then the book moves forward about a year, and she is drowning in her grief. She's just basically trying to keep her head above water. She doesn't know what happened to her kid. There are no leads, and she doesn't know where to put all her feelings. And they're she's been sinking for a while. And then she discovers that her husband, and their marriage has been getting more and more distant because of the stress. She discovers her husband is having an affair with a much younger woman. And, she basically loses her, whatever little bit of, sanity she had left, it's gone. And she has a place to channel all of her rage. And she does. So, I mean, the book for me was really supposed to be about cheating. That was the first scene that I could see, was her learning of the affair and her whole vision for her life just fracturing in 1 second. And it was a good life. And I describe it as such, right? They have a nice house, they have businesses, they're successful, attractive people. But those are the people I feel in my mind, in my imagination, that have the biggest, darkest stuff happening on the inside. And so one of the things I like to write about is, this is on the surface, what's really going on behind closed doors. And that's, that's kind of the crux of a domestic suspense. But I wanted to find out, she was mad about the cheating, but I wanted to find out exactly why she was so mad. And so then as we peel back the layers, we start to kind of get ideas of what might have happened to the kid. And of course, her husband, who's a handsome man, successful man, what motivated him to cheat. And so everyone is kind of a villain, and everyone is kind of a hero, and everyone has their own level of shady. And I wanted to dig into that.
And you do it so incredibly adroitly. I mean, it's not, not to belabor the metaphor again, but it's not hitting people over the head with it. You build on it so quietly at first, because we are inside of your main character's mind in the beginning. We see her disillusionment with her life, not just with the loss of her son, which is almost unimaginable, but also the idea that the only thing that she has to hold on to, the marriage, is falling apart. Right. And it's falling apart intentionally because the husband is cheating. But I also thought you did a good job of showing the husband's perspective as well. Not, he's not a great guy, but showing why he fell into this affair. Again, doing that thing where you're able to empathize but not sympathize. You're not making excuses for him, but he lost a child too. And I think sometimes
that's exactly it. Yeah, that's exactly it.
Yeah.
And how can he truly be villainized if he's going through the same grief that she is? She's medicating with wine every night, and he's medicating with a 24-year-old, right? So both awful things, right? Both awful things. But Marin, as a mom, and I can relate to this, having a 7-year-old, you internalize all of the awfulness. It's always your fault. Anything that goes wrong in your family's life, if someone is struggling, if your kid isn't doing well, you feel all of that and you carry that. Whereas with Derek, I felt like he's going to put all of that angst outward rather than inward. He's gonna hurt his wife, who's already hurting, right? And destroy the one good thing, which was their marriage, because he can't deal with the grief of not knowing where his son is. And then he takes Kenzie, who's the 24-year-old, along for the ride, right? But then Kenzie is not this innocent thing either. So, she knows he's married. Yeah, she knows she's, and at first I kind of was writing Kenzie, and I'm like, okay, 24, pink hair, Instagram famous, or wanting to be. And I'm like, I hate her, But then as I was kind of writing her, I'm like, there's a reason she does this stuff. Like this doesn't come from nowhere, right? And then she has a whole life too, which, doesn't excuse the things that she does, but it helps you kind of see how she got there. Because I don't want anyone to be all bad, and I don't want anyone to be all good, because that's how we are. I know behind your smiling face is something else, like you look like a big teddy bear, but those books you write come from somewhere.
Oh yeah, I've been in more than one bar fight, but
Yeah, we need to have like an event just talking about that.
But I wanted to also touch on, you said something interesting there about the way that you constructed the story, the pacing and the structure from a technical aspect for me as a writer was also fantastic, because we start out, like you said, from a very finite point of view, which is Marion's point of view. She's lost her child, child's missing, the worst thing that could possibly happen. And then we widen out to the marriage falling apart. But then, like you said, we get into Kenzie's perspective. There are several chapters there from her point of view. And I thought you did an excellent job of showing, again, in little increments, that this person is hurt. This person is, maybe not the best place mentally. Not excusing her actions, but, making us empathetic to what she's going through. And I wanted to ask you, when it came to Kenzie, how did you construct her as a character? Like, when did you draw, your motivation from her?
I drew my motivation from her because I was obsessed one year with having pink hair. And as a guy, you probably didn't notice my obsession, but I was like literally wanting to have pink hair, and I was coloring it pink. And I was following all of these Instagram influencers who had pink hair. And there was one specific person who wasn't particularly like Instagram famous, but I really loved her hair. And I wanted to know what her life was like. I'm like, she posts all these gorgeous photos, perfectly lit. She looks happy. And I'm thinking, is she really? Is she really? And so that's kind of where Kenzie came from. I was inspired by, kind of the way we cultivate our image on social media versus what the reality of it is in real life. And I find that everyone chooses a narrative. So if you're on social media, some people are very angry, and that's their whole social media thing. And then some people like me are very like, oh, look at this funny thing that happened, right? Everyone is different, but then at the end, that's not necessarily who we are. So that was the inspiration for Kenzie, but I didn't want her to be a 24-year-old bubblehead. I tried to think back, like, if, can you imagine if you and I, being the age that we are, if we had social media back when we were in our 20s, like, what would that have been like? What hot water what pictures would I have posted, that would have lost me jobs or what have you? Like, you don't know, right? And so these people, these younger folks today are growing up, and everything they do is documented. And it's almost weird if you don't document it. And so that was another element that I wanted to explore. But I mean, I don't know how your writing process is, but mine is not linear, And so as I'm writing, I can see certain things in certain people, and I run with that for a little while. And then I kind of change gears and I see someone else, and I run with that for a little while. And then I panic, usually around 70,000 words. And that's when I'm like, well, what am I writing? There's this. And then I have to it's an awful process. Everyone is like, how do you write a novel? I'm like, don't ask me, because I won't teach you anything. But I don't know. Are you linear in the way that you write?
I am, and I'm not, because and I was going to say, I think that the style that you have works so well for you, because as a writer, let me back up. As a reader, when I read your books, I'm like in the moment, like, wow, this person's got this storyline going on, and how does she do this at the same time? These two storylines that are going to intersect, and I know they're going to intersect somewhere, but I don't know where. But as a writer, when I read your work, I'm like, I can see, like, okay, you wrote that part first, and you wrote this part second, then, and you came back, and it gives it a really incredible rhythm that I am, again, do not have the ability to do. I write linear, but I will sometimes skip ahead, and then I get myself in trouble, because then I got to backtrack. Like, I got to make this make sense, because these people would have known. They would have known this then. So now I got to make some kind of caveat to make that work. But I thought you did I can see the way and you did that in Jar Hearts too, where these different pieces eventually come together and intersect at a place where you wouldn't usually expect. And without giving anything away with little secrets, there are twists and turns that happen in that book that I did not see coming. And I usually pride myself on being able to plot and spot things like that. And so
you're that kind of reader where you're like, I'm going to figure this out before the end.
That ain't got nothing to do with you. That's me. I'm the worst person to go see a mystery movie with. Oh my God, should have been with me. When we went to see Knives Out, I got yelled at so many times for saying stuff out loud.
For blurring.
I was right though. But anyway. Anyway, but I wanted to say with certain characters that, like, the way that you brought them together into their lives. So you're more of a plotter than more of a pantser than a plotter?
I mean,
I guess it's a question.
When you say that, you didn't see certain things coming, that is not because I'm skilled at that necessarily. It's because I didn't know. I didn't know. And I can tell you, okay, without giving spoilers away, I had a whole bunch of scenes with two different points of view and different timelines. And I was like, okay, what am I going to, there needs to be a villain. And this is the point where I'm going to start to reveal these things. I need to lead up to the end. And I got stuck. I had not dropped any breadcrumbs in the book at that point to tell me definitively who was the villain in Little Secrets. And I had to stop, and I swirled for a long time. And I was afraid to ask my editor because I didn't want him to know how behind I was. So I didn't tell him. And I think he's watching right now, but he knows this already. Okay. But so I called my agent, which I never do. And I'm terrible at asking for help. I just really am. I'm very private when I'm writing a first draft. But I called her and I said, I'm stuck. I don't know how this book ends. And she's like, well, run me through what you have and give me the options. And so I ran her through it. And in the end, she's like, you know what, honey, because she's very kind, right? I like this person, but ultimately, if you write it well, it doesn't really matter. And it kind of took the pressure off. It's like, oh yeah, it's my story, right? No one's going to read this and be like, hey, you were supposed to do that person as the villain. Nobody knows. It's a first draft. It's still with me. I can just choose. Right. And so I picked a lane and then I finished it. But that is my worst thing as a writer, is being very indecisive, is giving myself too much to choose from. And then I don't know which way to go. And I do that with every single book. And I need to take a course or something on how not to do that, because I swirl, I'm not an efficient writer. I'm working on it.
I will share with you my worst aspect of
yes, please.
Is that when I get stuck, and because of the kind of books I write, I always result to I don't just result to like Chekhov's gun. I result to like Chekhov's machine gun, Chekhov's bomb. I will just, and my agent has pulled me back from the brink so many times. I'll just kill everybody. No. It's like, I'll tell you something. It's funny. And I know the folks at Flatiron and Macmillan are probably listening. So, they probably heard this for the first time. The original ending of Blacktop Wasteland was a bloodbath beyond what the way it is now.
Really?
Yes, it was Heat meets Pulp Fiction meets whatever, the Wild Bunch or something. And my agent, God bless him, he calls me. He's like, hey, I really like this book. He says, but I don't think you need to kill everyone. It's like everybody doesn't have to die. And so we got to the core of why I was doing it. And the reason I was doing that was the way the book ends now, currently, was very difficult for me to write. I did not want to have that very difficult, complex, emotional confrontation. Yeah. So it was easier for me to just fall back on, well, we'll just have everybody get shot in the face instead of let's deal with the actual, substance and crux to the book. But in the long run, I think it really helped the book. It really helped me as a writer to confront that situation. Yeah. And I didn't think I had the skill to do it. And so, but anyway.
But no, but that's I can relate to everything that you just said, because the thing that I don't want to write, like the thing that I know is going to be hard, right? When I force myself to write it, it usually turns out to be the best thing in the book. So I completely get that. But also, I want to read that alternate ending.
I'll send it to you because it was. Please. Like I said, it was a bloodbath. Wow. There's a line in Little Secrets, and I know I'm getting it wrong, but it struck me so hard, and I wrote it down, and I don't have my papers now, but because I moved offices. But there's something you said they had a character say that was talking about another character, about a man, and you said, and somebody said he's nice, and you had another character say he might be nice, but that doesn't mean he's kind. Or something.
He's good. Yeah. He might be nice, but that doesn't mean he's good. Yeah.
Yes. Oh my God.
Yes.
I was reading that And I yelled out loud when I got to that line. I was like, yes, that's such an insightful and so really such an insightful way that I don't think a man would have written that line. And I don't mean that disrespectfully at all.
No.
I think there's an insightfulness that women have when it comes to men, that especially men who are presenting themselves one way, that women who have lived a life can see through that, can see through the facade in a way that other men can't, and maybe other women who haven't had the experiences they had. And I thought that was such a powerful point.
Well, and sometimes we don't want to see it, right? We want our vision of who this person is to be the real person, and we'll overlook a lot of stuff, especially when we love people. We'll overlook the toxicity. We'll overlook the fact that something isn't quite genuine. We might even know we're being lied to, but we don't want to ruin it. We don't want to ruin how it looks, right? We want that to be true. And when I wrote that line, I had a specific person in mind. Might or might not have been my first husband, but it was just thinking about, it's easy to be nice. Like, we can all be nice, but there's an innate goodness that I think most of us, because I'm an optimist, right? Most of us are good people, but some of us are just not, or there's a chunk of us that are just not. And it still presents as nice. It looks nice, smells nice, but it's not good. It may actually be very, very, very bad for you. It's like, I'm allergic to peanuts, and it's a benign thing unless you're allergic to it, right? And so that's kind of what I had in mind when I was doing it. Oh, I just saw my dad commenting from the Philippines. Hi, Dad. Very cool.
I love that. Right. That is so great. I'm going to say hi, Dad, to your dad as well. I thought that was such a good line, though, because as I've gotten older, I've observed my male friends, my friends, and I realized a lot of times guys who were trying to be nice were only nice because they thought it would get them something. And I wasn't able to see that when I was younger. I really wasn't. I had not gonna go into too much detail because I don't want to take up the time. But I had a friend who, when I was younger, I thought this guy was really nice. And then one day I talked to a female friend of ours, and they were like, blank is not a nice guy. I'm like, really? No, he's always opening doors for women, and he's always saying yes, ma'am, and no, ma'am. Whenever we were out at the club back in the day, he was always the dude that was, the most polite. And then she was like, yeah, and she said, but behind all the politeness is something rotten, and
wow.
and I never could see it, and so that line really spoke to me, because I think, like you said, so many of us will either refuse or just don't want to see it because you don't want to.
We don't want to see it, And nice is commodified in relationships sometimes, right? Like, we're using it to be transactional. If you want someone to do something for you, or you want something from someone, you'll be nice because it gives you what you want. It gives you what you want, right?
Mm-hmm. And there's a specific character,
John, I think there you are.
I can't go into spoilers. That once I read that line, I was gonna say there's a specific character in the book that once I read that line, I never looked at them the same. And it was like, yeah, need to keep an eye on it.
I ruined it for you.
No, not at all. Not at all, because then it became suspense. It was like, okay, something's going on there. I can keep an eye on this particular person. And I thought that was such an incredible thing that you did. And, and you can say you didn't plan it, but whether, you planned it or not, you did it. And I think that's the innate skill that you bring as a writer. And
thank you so much.
I'm so impressed with it. I'm so impressed with everything you do. But
thank you.
Another thing I wanted to ask you, I wanted to touch on, and I will say this, how do I say it? Do you have a really good grasp of both the emotional and, like you said earlier, the transactional of sensuality, of intimacy in relationships and marriages and so on and so forth? And I've seen it in Freak and in The Butcher, and it really came to fore in Jar of Hearts. And then it was like in Little Secrets, it was almost like this was the penultimate expression of that idea. And I wanted to ask, is that something intentional, or does it just comes from the interaction of your characters?
I think I'm a naturally nosy person, right? I like, I like knowing who's someone dating and how's it going and, what base did you get to? Like, I'm very nosy. So I'm no different in my books. I enjoy books that don't fade to black. And so there is sex in my books because I'm interested to know, like, after all this buildup, how was last night, And then what is the aftermath of that, and who was really in it and who was just going along with it. Because I think all relationships are kind of, you never know what the other person is really thinking and if they're there for you. And I think with every book, I've explored that only because I'm curious. I want to know how this is going to end. And for Little Secrets, there was a marriage. They are married 20 years. What would it take to blow that up? If you've built something with someone over 2 decades of your life, what would it take? And it turns out that the thing that fractures a 20-year marriage in this case is a missing child. That was the thing that came in and went, but then at the same time, I think like cheating, for instance, it's such a specific series of factors for every couple, and for some people, they have a deal breaker where you cheat, you're gone. Other people, let's work through it. And I just wanted to know where everyone's boundaries were, because that's another thing that I'm always fascinated by, or how far will you let something go before you push back, and some characters snap right away and some characters just keep going, and so, which is probably a reflection of the stuff that I work on in therapy. But honestly, it's boundaries and being nosy and a little bit voyeuristic and wanting to know what my characters are doing. What are you doing off page, and then tell us.
I thought reading Little Secrets, and I've read almost all your books, you use sexuality the way I use violence. It's a means to an end, because
I would say
it's it's not just about the act, it's about the repercussions and what led up to it, and so whether it's being intimate with someone, or why is this person cheating on somebody, or why does somebody pick up, this axe and go up somebody's head? It's the same thing.
Don't you think that's more interesting though? Like, don't you think it's more interesting what the behavior is, or what the motivation is to get to that point where this is the only way I can express this, right? Is to resort to violence, or for me, resort to sex, right? And I find the journey there, and then what happens after is the exciting part. That's the part that I care about. Yeah, I agree with you on that. But you write violence so well. I mean, honestly, you really do.
I tell you the truth, and I'm not particularly a violent person, but I grew up in an area where toxic masculinity was the rule of the law, the rule of the land. And so therapy helped me get past that and realize there are different conflict mediations that you can use. But I will say there's enough of a country boy in me still that sometimes some people just deserve a good old-fashioned ass. But but anywho,
that part will never leave you, hopefully.
Probably won't. Got too many scars on my knuckles. But no, I wanted to speak about Marin, because we've kind of jumped around to different things. Mm-hmm. There's a point in the book where Marin is terrifying, and I thought you did this really interesting thing where it's almost like she becomes the villain for 4 or 5 chapters. Yeah. And I was wondering, was that difficult? Because and I'm going to reference another book, you did that, you do this thing again with these characters where you take characters and you make us root for difficult people. And that's not easy. And I don't mean that in the term that a lot of literary people say, well, female characters are difficult to like, or they're they're never unlikable. That's not really what I'm trying to say. It's not that they're unlikable or likable. They're difficult and they're complex.
They're difficult, yeah.
And they're flawed. They're not easy. Yeah, that are not easy to get your arms around. And yet you, through the sheer force of your writing skill, you make us care about these characters. And I thought with Marin, that was really, really evident, because once she decides that Kinsey, I don't think this is a spoiler, but Marin decides Kinsey gotta die. And once she decides Kinsey gotta go, she uses all of her energy and her pain and her
she flexes. She completely flexes at that point. Yeah. It was,
I thought you could just, go ahead. Go ahead.
No, thank you. She was grieving. She was rock bottom. And Kenzie was someone she could hate, where she didn't have to feel bad about that because Kenzie really was doing her wrong by sleeping with her husband. And the anger that she felt was so extreme and so pure and so uncomplicated that it was the only thing that could have picked her up off the puddle that she had been drowning in for a year. And again, that comes a little bit from personal experience where I spiraled for a little while after an earlier relationship ended. And it wasn't till I got good and mad that I was able to move forward. When the anger set in, there was such relief in being mad rather than being hurt, and then having a broken heart, which didn't accomplish anything. I just walked around, complaining all the time. So when I got angry, it was like, oh, I'm angry. This feels good. I can get things done. And so for Marin, she feels this white hot rage that is the best thing she could have felt at that time. Now, she can't feel that way forever because that will destroy her, right? But it was the thing that, kind of snapped her out of her funk and gave her a sense of purpose, which she had completely lost because her life she was frozen in the moment where she lost Sebastian, where she let go of his hand and he disappeared. And she wasn't able to move on from that, right? And so she had a lot of stuff to hurt herself to stay in that moment. She couldn't get rid of any of his clothes. She couldn't rearrange anything in the house because she wanted everything to be the same. Because if she started to move forward, it meant she was letting him go. And she couldn't let him go. But the anger was like, okay, I can be mad about this and I can do stuff now, And so, but the thing is, like you said, it turned her into a villain for a little while. And then you're like, yo, what is up with this woman? She's doing, no, like that is not how we handle things, but she didn't care. She was so angry, but it was fun. It was fun to write that. That part was really fun, actually.
Oh no, I could totally see that. And I remember reading those parts and I was like, I felt like Marin's like old crusty uncle. I was like, oh baby, no. Stop.
Yeah, exactly.
There's a scene where there's a scene in the coffee shop where she confronts, or you think she's going to confront Kenzie. Mm-hmm. And I remember reading that. I'm like, somebody's going to die in this. Somebody's going to die in the neck with a fingernail file or something because by that point, we're in Marin's head so deep where I'm like, yeah, I don't see any other option. Yeah. I don't see any other
and you're
way
like,
out.
you're in her head and you're like, I don't like being here because I don't know what she's going to do. And it's not going to be good, but she,
I tell you, you wrote yourself into a situation where I thought it was going to go here and it went all the way over there. And as a reader, there's nothing better than that. I love that. And I don't, like I said, I don't have that kind of skill, but I'm in awe of your ability to do that. And you do it consistently. So that's incredible.
I think the themes in Little Secrets I don't know this at the time that I'm writing it, but when I think back, I'm like, I think a lot of people can relate, right? To feeling like you were, passed over for someone better. And when she goes to the coffee shop, she's compelled because Kenzie works there. She's compelled to see, who Derek is sleeping with. She needs to know, is this person better than me? Is she more beautiful than me? And all she can see when she looks at Kenzie are all the things she isn't. So young, tall, flashy with the pink hair, cute and bubbly and all those things that she doesn't feel like she is. But in a later chapter, when Kenzie is looking at Marin, Kenzie too sees all the things that she isn't. She's a successful woman. She's got a confidence about her that Kenzie has not grown into yet, and so it's that was another thing I want to tap into was just how women tend to judge each other and how we see each other, because a lot of people asked, why didn't you ever write a chapter from Derek's point of view? Like, why didn't you get into his head and write a few chapters from Derek's perspective? And it wasn't intentional that I didn't write about it, but I personally wasn't interested to hear what Derek had to say. I wasn't interested to know. I didn't want to hear him make excuses, right? I wanted him to be shaped by what the women in his life saw, so when we see is what Kenzie and Marency, and then he's probably a blend of those things. But I think that's relatable. I think the judgment and feeling hurt and being motivated to blow shit up, in the way that I do it as a psych thriller writer, not the way that you do it as Southern noir, like we do it differently, but the impact is the same, right? Everything just goes.
I never thought I wanted to hear from Derek at any point.
Oh, you didn't? Okay, good. Yeah.
No, because it's like, as somebody who's writes a lot of male characters, I felt like, especially in this book, that the voice of Maren needed to be centered. But after a while, I also felt like this was Kenzie's story. There was a kinship between the two of them that I didn't need Derek's perspective. Maybe
I'm glad to hear that. Yeah, I'm glad to hear that, because I would have wondered what you thought. Was it missing that element? No. So that's good to know. Okay, thank you.
I really don't want to interrupt. This has been such a great conversation. I have to just say, you two are so dynamic, and there are so many good quotable lines. We've already got someone plotting to make a t-shirt in the chat over something that was said earlier. So this is so much fun to listen to you two. I do have some audience questions. We've got some great questions from the audience that I wanted to get to. And also, anybody watching, the window has not closed. So if you want to drop a couple questions in the Q&A, don't feel like you've missed your chance. But actually, playing off of the last question the last thing that you just talked about, we do have a question about whether you like to write from the perspective of a man or a woman more.
Is that for me?
It's for you. Yeah, it's for you. But also, Sean, if you wanted to answer.
Yeah, I'd love to hear Sean's take on it too. I do write from a man's perspective, not every book for some reason, because I think how women see the world is obviously my default. But I'm afraid to assume things. I worry that when I write from a man's POV, I'm writing from a man's POV as a woman perceives it. And I don't know how effective that is. And so I'm careful when I'm writing from a man's perspective. I don't want to have any stereotypes in there. But I think my go-to is I write women's fiction, but I write about women's experiences and issues. And so it's natural for me to gravitate towards that. And Sean, I think you're the opposite, yeah?
Yeah, I am. And I think I really work hard to create female characters that are not caricatures, that are characters. I don't like having female characters that are just there to hold up, my outlaws and my bad men. I try to make my female characters strong without being naggy, I guess.
Right.
I want them to be strong in their own right. I've gotten asked that before, like, will I ever write a female-centric story or a story from the point of view of I think, I'm not gonna say never, because I think if whatever story excites me, I'll write it. But right now, I think these are stories I'm best suited to tell so far. And so that's kind of my answer to that. But I love having strong female characters in my work. I never want to have a character just be like a gun moll or whatever. And so I work really hard. I was raised by a lot of strong, tough women, so I try to respect that in my writing.
Yeah, that totally makes sense. And what you were saying about not wanting to write caricatures, I think that obviously you write what you know best, but also if you are able to observe people the way that you two so clearly are able to observe people and sort of take in human nature, then you're writing an individual too. And whether that's a man or a woman, they have their individual traits that you can kind of write about. Thank you both. So let's move on to this question. You both write difficult characters so well. Did you have to push through other people's opinions early in your career, or even still, to make sure your characters didn't become more likable?
Yeah, I definitely did. So going back to my first novel, Creep, when I was a baby writer and I hadn't yet found an agent, I hadn't even finished that book, I was workshopping it, and I had written the lead character the way she was published, which is she's a sex addict and she's cheating on her fiance. And there were a couple of guys in my workshop who were really grossed out. And that's literally the feedback they gave in the weekly, when we're presenting our stuff, we're like, this is gross. I'll never forget it. This is gross. Nobody wants to read about a sex addict who's a woman who's cheating. And I took that to heart because I was very new and I wasn't sure about it. And I changed the entire story because of that feedback. It sunk so deep. When the time came for me to look for an agent, I was querying with a manuscript that had that character not a sex addict. Rather than her cheating multiple times, it was just a mistake one time. And the book, all the stuff that made the book was gone. And I was getting rejection letters that were like, this book has no oomph, like it's very kind of, it's bland, not for us, pass. And then I got mad and I went back and I changed it to the original version. And then I signed with my agent and then the book sold. So there was pushback to portray women a certain way. And what I learned in terms of likable was it was not as important to be likable as it was to be interesting. Yeah. So I never forgot that.
Yeah, I'll just be real quick with it. Yeah, I got some pushback on my early books. I wrote a novella that was shopped around that got rejected a lot. And the biggest complaint was, I don't know why this lead character is so angry. Why is he such an angry Black man? And I'm like, at one point when I had a different agent and my agent was talking to me about it, and he asked me like, why is he so angry? I'm like, because he lives in the South and he's a Black man. That's why he's angry. And so it was like, and so I got that pushback and I was like, but he's not angry without purpose. You got to look at the things that happened to him. And, he lost his parents to a hate crime and so on and so forth. And he's not angry without direction. His anger is what drives him to want to do differently. With Blacktop Wasteland, I didn't really get that kind of pushback, but it's still, there were questions asked about, well, can he be more uplifting and so on and so forth. And so
really?
You get that every once in a while. Yeah, yeah. It's like, why don't he use he's so smart. Why don't he use his powers for good? And but ultimately, like what Jennifer said, the story that's in your heart is the story you have to tell. And you can't do that by committing,
Yeah, absolutely. Okay. Have you ever discarded parts of your writing and then gone back to them for your later work?
I have. So my trunk novel, the one I wrote way back in 2007 when I had no idea what I was doing, was so awful. I didn't know how to revise it. Like, it was so bad. I did every single cliched new writer thing that you could do, and it was legit terrible. But in book 3, I had a contract for book 3, and I was stuck. I was stuck on book 3, and I thought, what if I resurrected this trunk novel, changed it from a horror? I am not cut out for horror. Horror is really hard to write. A horror into a thriller, a monster into a serial killer, and kind of recycled it. And I did, and that became The Butcher. So, for any writers who wonder, should I delete this scene? Never delete anything, because you never know when you're going to come back and be inspired by it again. So yeah, I have reused, I've reused stuff.
Yeah, there's a character in Razorblade Tears that I tried to write a novel about by himself, and I just couldn't. And I'm not gonna say which character because I want people to guess, but there was a character and I just couldn't make it work. It's like he didn't have enough oomph to be on his own, but putting him in as a supporting character worked a lot better than I ever would imagine. Yeah. And so, and I've done that before. I've done that a lot of times. I have characters that move in and out of short story. Bug was a short story character that I didn't think had enough oomph to be a book. He was the opposite. But once I finished a short story, he wouldn't leave me alone. And I kept thinking
he had way more to say.
Yeah. This guy with this fast car. And so that's it. That's where that came from. So yeah, I go in both directions with that.
Someone did ask if we'll be seeing more of Bug.
I think so. I'm working on something different right now, but I'm still curious about those montage boys. They won't leave me alone. And I wonder how they look 10 years down the road. Like, so 10 years after the events of Blacktop Wasteland, where's Javon and Darren? Are Bug and Kia back together? Did Bug go straight? Did he go completely straight? What are their lives look like? And can you ever let go of that devil that has you by the tail? So I think we'll we'll see him.
There's a lot to explore there. Yeah, there's a lot to explore there. I want to see a sequel.
Well,
I do.
You heard it here first, folks. You might be in the future. Jennifer, we have this question from Darren. My son has a question for his mom.
Oh,
Long did it take? How long did it take to write Little Secrets? I know I was there, but I can't remember.
It took a year to write that book. There are lots of stops and starts with it. And the place where I thought the book was going to begin, which if you've read it, was the diner scene with Marin meeting up with Julian late at night. That was my opening originally. And the book kind of unravels from there, and it wasn't working. And so that scene ended up being later in the book, once we find out how she got to the diner. But Mox, it took mommy a long time and a lot of late nights and a lot of writing until 6 a.m, because you're very active during the day and there were lots of interruptions.
That may be the sweetest question we've ever gotten in one of these. Can I ask how old Mox is?
He's 7 and he has to stay up late to watch me and my friend Sean on camera. So
that is so great. Okay, we have time for just a couple more questions. So I'm going to ask this one. You both write such incredibly suspenseful and violent books. What do you do to relax?
I'll let Sean go first.
Oh man, I live in Virginia, so I'm surrounded by the beautiful natural world of Virginia. So I like to go hiking a lot. I've been to I think most of the state parks in Virginia. So that's something. Before the pandemic, I used to love lifting weights. I used to work on plot points at the gym by working out. And unfortunately, because I can't work out, I've gained weight, and I'm also I struggled a little bit when I was writing Razorblade Tears, during the pandemic, and there were plot points that were hard for me to figure out because I didn't have any way to channel my frustration. Another thing I do to relax, a lot of people wouldn't believe it. I like to plant flowers. I love to garden. That's my fit. Really,
that is so surprising.
I know, but I love to plant. I like plant like gladiolas, and I have some rose bushes in the front yard that I mess with. It's just I go out there and I love being. I'm a country boy at heart, so I love being in the natural world. But yeah, I love gardening, so that's one of my secrets that you've learned tonight. So
that is huge. That's a huge thing that I never would have guessed. For me, before everything shut down, it was a lot of hot yoga. I'm not good at yoga, but the heat and the darkness, because they keep the studio lights very dim, forced me not to look around and notice anything else that was going on and just kind of be present in the moment, which is something I struggle with because I'm always worrying about the next thing. And I feel like I live my life in hindsight, where I'm there and I'm, talking to people, and then I don't realize until after it's over that, I had a good time. And so yoga is good for me because it allows me to be present. But I watch a lot of reality TV, which is really embarrassing, but I do. I'm fascinated with Real Housewives because these are women who have everything, every privilege, and they still find shit to be mad about. And that fascinates me, right? It's like, how can you be mad about anything, right? But they're mad all the time. So I watch that to kind of make myself feel better about my life. But I'm just a mom. Like, my life is really boring. I nothing about it is that interesting. I'm in my sweats all day long. I've always got food stains on my shirt. It's really not a glamorous life, but I wouldn't trade it for anything.
It sounds like you definitely have at least somebody in the chat who appreciates that. Okay, so we've got a couple questions about your upcoming book, Jennifer. So can you give us a quick overview of what it's going to look like? And just remember, just so that everyone knows, that's coming in July. So keep an eye out for it.
Okay, this is the first time I've been asked to say out loud what my book is about, and I'm terrible at summarizing.
This can be your practice for
my practice elevator pitch, which is always my struggle. It's basically about a Filipino woman who is married to a much older white celebrity comedian who's retired, and then he winds up dead, and she is arrested for his murder. And as bad as she feels about that, what she's mostly worried about is that because he was famous, people will see her and recognize her from her past because she isn't who she says she is. So when she married this guy, she thought he was retired and out of show business, but then he suddenly decided to make a comeback. And she was trying to stay out of the spotlight and she couldn't. So the book is partly set in Seattle and partly set in Toronto. And that's the first time I've ever written a book that's even partly set in Canada. And it makes me really nervous. I know, Sean, you write a lot about what you're in, like your space that you're in. And for me, there's always been a bit of a distance. And now I went right back home and I'm worried I'm going to piss people off by how I portrayed my city, like that's not how we are here. Well, sometimes, so yeah, I'm excited about this book. I'm nervous and excited for this book to come out always.
That is an incredible elevator pitch. I'm very intrigued. Just a reminder to everyone that that's called Things We Do in the Dark. So keep an eye out for it. And I'm actually going to drop the link to our bookstore partners for this event in there, just in case everyone wants to just bookmark those options for ordering the book when it does come out in July. Okay, last question, and this is one that I really love ending on whenever we can, is what are you two reading right now that you're loving? What can you recommend for people?
Oh, so many. I have read I read Hannah Mary McKinnon's upcoming book. She's a Canadian author. I just finished Kelly Garrett's book recently, and Alex Segura's book is next on my list. But I'm actually really terrible about remembering. I should keep a list of books. And if you say that, oh yeah, I read that. But off the top of my head, I'm like, I know I've read a whole bunch and why can't I think of anything? But yeah, and probably my most recent favorite nonfiction was Dave Grohl's The Storyteller, which was a memoir, the Foo Fighters guy who was in Nirvana. We listened to his audiobook on a long drive, and there was so much of his creative process that I can relate to, and that was really fun. I recommend that.
That's great. Thank you.
I just finished Shoot the Moonlight Out by William Boyle, which is an incredible, I don't even want to call it a crime novel. It's almost like if Charles Dickens wrote a crime novel. It's incredible, just a cast of characters and a slice of life in this little New York part of New York. I think it is fascinating to me. I finished a book that's not out yet, but it comes out this year called Don't Know Tough by Eli Craner, about a football coach trying to make a difference in a small Arkansas town and how that goes awry. That was really good. Her Name is Night by Yasmin. Yasmin writes under two different names, and now I can't remember what. I
know, Yasmin Angle McClinton. Yeah.
Yes, and thank you so much. But Her Name is Night is wonderful. It's like if John Wick was a woman from Africa. It's an incredible book. I love that book.
Okay, you need to write my pitches, okay? Because
I was gonna say these
you put like 7 words together, and it's like I'm instantly gonna buy that book.
and then finally, I listened to the Bruce Springsteen's Born to Run autobiography, and he reads it, and so
I love that.
I'm a huge Springsteen fan. I think he's one of our great American writers, not just songwriters, and his learning about his childhood, learning about his past and how he got to be where he came from. I felt a kinship there because we both came from economically disadvantaged background. So those are my recommendations.
Those are wonderful. Thank you both so much for those recommendations and also for just joining us tonight. This has really been the best time. It's been so much fun to listen to you two talk, and we love your books. So just a reminder to everyone watching to go buy them if you haven't already. Go check them out. And another big thank you to our bookstore partners who partnered with us on this event. We can't do these events without them. We're so grateful for their partnership. So we really appreciate it. And Jennifer, Sean, thank you so much and have a wonderful evening.
Thank you so much, Sean. It was so good to see you.
It's so good seeing you, Jennifer. I miss you, darling. Y'all take care.
I miss you too. Bye.
Thank you all. Have a wonderful night.
You too. Thank you, Meg.